Morning of the 4th of September, 1939. The sky over the North Sea is heavy with low clouds, as 10 Bristol Blenheim bombers from the British Royal Air Force slice through the icy air toward Germany. It's the first Allied counterattack, a daring mission against the Nazi naval fleet anchored at Wilhelmshaven. The pilots, hearts racing to the roar of engines and the metallic smell of burning oil, know they're writing history, but the cost could be high. Meanwhile, in invaded Poland, the ground trembles under the weight of relentless German tanks advancing, crushing villages and spreading terror among civilians and Polish soldiers. The air is thick with the acrid smell of gunpowder and burning wood, and cries of pain echo through the streets of cities like Piotrków Trybunalski, where Nazi repression is already showing its brutal face. Let's dive into the chaos of this day. Just one day after Britain and France declared war, British commanders decide to act. The order is clear: strike German warships to weaken the Nazi Navy before it can threaten the British Isles. The Blenheims take off from airfields in England, flying low over the gray waves of the North Sea, where sea salt mixes with the cold sweat of the crews. Each plane carries heavy bombs, and the pilots feel the weight not just of the weapons, but of the responsibility to launch the Allied response. As they approach Wilhelmshaven, the German naval port, the sky erupts in anti-aircraft fire. Nazi guns unleash bursts that tear through the air, and the smell of cordite invades the cockpits as the planes dive to drop their loads. One of the pilots, the lieutenant leading the attack, would later report, "We even saw clothes hanging on a line. When we flew over the ship, we saw the crew members running hurriedly to their posts. We dropped our bombs. The second pilot, following behind me, saw 2 of them hit the target. But the victory is bitter. The ships suffer no irreparable damage, and 5 of the 10 bombers are shot down by German defenses. Among the dead is Lieutenant H.B. Lightoller, son of the British officer who survived the Titanic sinking more than 2 decades ago. Twisted metal from the planes plunges into the frigid sea, and families back home feel the first real blow of war's loss. This attack, though modest in material results, marks the start of British air operations, sending a message that Britain won't stand idle against Nazi aggression. In Britain, news of the attack boosts public morale. Radios broadcast heroic accounts, and the public imagines skies filled with Allied planes, a sign that the fight has truly begun. The surviving pilots are awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross, recognition for their brave dive into hell. But there's a moral directive. British commanders order that civilian German lives not be risked. At this early stage of the war, such a restriction seems not just ethical, but feasible, a stark contrast to what's happening on the other side of Europe. While the British fly with surgical precision, avoiding civilian targets, the Germans adopt a brutal approach, where the line between combatants and innocents dissolves in the invasion's chaos. While the British seek precision, in Poland, the German army advances without mercy. Nazi troops, shielded by a superior air force, continue penetrating Polish territory. The smell of churned earth and fresh blood fills the air as panzer tanks from the 1st and 4th Panzer Divisions approach Piotrków Trybunalski, a strategic city in Poland's heart. The ground vibrates with the roar of diesel engines, and Polish soldiers, dug into defensive positions, feel the tremor in their hands gripping cold, sweaty rifles. Civilians flee along dusty roads, carrying few belongings, as the sky darkens with squadrons of German bombers. Explosions shake house foundations, scattering shards of brick and glass that cut skin like razors. In Piotrków Trybunalski, the battle intensifies from this day, with Germans breaking Polish lines after the clash at Borowa Góra. The Poles, desperate to halt the advance, launch counterattacks with the 1st and 2nd Tank Battalions, supported by infantry and cavalry divisions. The air fills with the clang of metal on metal, as light Polish tanks face German panzers in open fields, where dust rises like mist and the smell of burning diesel chokes the fighters. Polish soldiers, with the bitter taste of sweat and fear in their mouths, fire at the invading machines, but German numerical and technological superiority prevails. Hundreds of German armored vehicles push forward, crushing makeshift barricades and forcing defenders to retreat amid explosions that make the ground pulse like an accelerated heart. A brutal guerrilla war explodes everywhere, as the German chief of maintenance services, Eduard Wagner, wrote in his diary that day. "We are crushing them mercilessly. We won't turn back. We've already set up special tribunals that operate in continuous sessions. The stronger the repression, the sooner we'll have peace." This repression comes by land and air. Summary executions of suspected partisans, indiscriminate bombings turning streets into smoking craters, and systematic terror against the civilian population. Women and children hide in damp basements, where the air is suffocating with the odor of fear and sweat, while the sound of German boots echoes on the pavements. Nazi commanders give no orders to spare civilians. On the contrary, they encourage brutality to break Polish resistance quickly. In villages near Piotrków, farms burn, releasing black smoke clouds that darken the sun, and the cries of orphans mix with the crackle of flames. The Poles, once ordinary farmers and workers, now find themselves transformed into refugees, with calloused hands clutching family members in desperate flights along muddy roads, where the morning chill pierces thin clothes and the weight of uncertainty crushes spirits. Imagine the contrast. On one side, British pilots risking everything for a surgical strike, feeling the icy wind on the wings and hearts tight from losing comrades. On the other, German soldiers marching over bodies, with the metallic taste of victory mixed with the dust of Polish roads. This day marks the start of an asymmetric war, where the Allies' initial morality clashes with the Nazi destruction machine. Losses are felt on both sides, but in Poland, the human suffering is palpable. Families separated by chaos, villages in flames where the smell of burning flesh hangs in the air, and the constant sound of artillery making the ground pulse like a terrified heart. The Poles fight with fierce determination, but the German advance is inexorable, paving the way for deeper occupations and coming atrocities. In other fronts, neutrality is declared by nations like Holland and Belgium, but the echo of war already resounds across Europe, with German troops consolidating control in Gdańsk and the world watching the unfolding of a global catastrophe. Reflecting on this, the 4th of September, we see the first signs of a war that will consume millions. The British celebrate a small moral triumph, but Europe's skies are already filling with shadows. In Poland, the German advance isn't just military, but a wave of oppression that crushes spirits. How many lives have already been lost? The exact numbers are unknown in this initial chaos, but the impact is visceral, touching every soul involved. The day reveals the fragility of recent peace, with neutral nations like Japan announcing their stance as the conflict spreads like an uncontrollable fire. To not miss the next day in this dark journey through World War II, Subscribe to the channel, like this video, and comment below what you thought of this episode. Tomorrow we continue narrating the day by day of this human tragedy.